in chapter 8, and we're down at F. Is everybody with me? Okay. So, Bible, Matthew chapter 8, we'll read verses 18 to 22. Matthew 8:18 to 22. Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to depart unto the other side. And a certain scribe came and said unto him, Master, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. And Jesus saith unto him, The foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. And another of his disciples said unto him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said unto him, Follow me, and let the dead bury their dead. So F, Jesus tests people's desire to follow him. There are constraints to our commitment to Christ. We'd say that there are tests to see if we really mean it when we make a promise, I'm going to follow Jesus. So 12 disciples were supposed to cross the Sea of Galilee. And he's getting them ready to go, and before they leave, a certain scribe, S-C-R-I-B-E, he's a copyist of the law. He was an original copy machine. And he volunteered to go with Jesus anywhere. Now that'd be pretty honorable, because a scribe was very intelligent, very well paid, and yet here he was willing to go with Jesus. So he liked what Jesus said, and he's willing to go, but Jesus turns to him and says, I have no certain future. You have a career. You have a job. People look up to you. You are very important. I don't know where I'm going to lay my head. I'm going to follow God's will. Will you follow God's will? That's what he's saying to this scribe. He says, do you realize I have no guarantee of where I'm going to be sleeping tonight? Isn't that the will of God sometimes? And you have to take a step back. We have a very cushy view of the Christian life because it has been cushy to us. It's been fairly easy to follow Jesus. But in most countries, it's not. If we were in a third world country and somebody said, Brother Craig, I believe God wants me to be a pastor, I would say, you're going to starve. You will starve. Well, I have a wife and I've got 5 children. And I'll say to them, you will starve. You're not going to make enough money from people for you to be able to own a vehicle, to be able to, you're ready to go. See, the call of God does not depend upon us having all of our supplies needed and everything taken care of. The call of God is, I got to go. And we've raised now, I'm afraid, in Christianity, generations of, I'm going to use the term, of millennials who really believe everything ought to be given to them. And that's true in Christianity as well. And Jesus says, if you're going to follow me, you're going to have any guarantee of where you're going to sleep tonight. Which is pretty amazing. He calls himself here the Son of Man. And this is the first time he calls himself that in Matthew. In the Old Testament, the Son of Man is primarily showing up in the book of Ezekiel. And without going through all the times, Ezekiel is a prophet that is a shadow of Jesus. Ezekiel has got so many similarities to the Messiah. And so when Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, he's not just using a phrase, he's using a definite prophetic title that belonged to Ezekiel as the Son of Man. And you'll see it probably about 50 times in the book of Ezekiel. In the New Testament, you find it also in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 51. It simply means the Son of Man. He's a human, but its use is prophetic. And I don't have a lot of time to go through that. You're going to have to just do some more of your research on this. Now, Jesus and his disciples crossed the Sea of Galilee in a storm. Look in verse 23 now. When he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him. So they all get into the ship. Behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. And his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. Did you notice the storm didn't wake him? It took his disciples to wake him. Save us, we perish. And he saith unto them, Why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? So what does fear feed on? Little faith. Unbelief. So why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and he rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. But the men marveled, saying, What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? So in this storm, Jesus travels with his disciples. Sometimes when he sends them off by himself, and he joins them later, maybe walking on the water. A great tempest means a storm. The ship is being covered by the waves. The disciples panic. You ever had a panic attack? They are unmanageable. They're indescribable. They are uncontrollable. When somebody's having a panic attack, you can't just say, hey, snap out of it. It is overwhelming. These men are panicking. They're facing death. Now, Jesus was sleeping. I guarantee you, he was tired. I'm sure he was on his feet, walking, working, doing 18 hours a day. He was tired. And he was showing by his sleep that they were super safe. You know, if you obey Jesus and if you're in the will of God, if Jesus is with you, and you just believe, if you just have enough faith, you'll be all right. So I would look at those three things. I would look and say, am I saved? Okay, he said he'll never leave me. Am I in the will of God? And am I trusting him? It should make it so we don't panic. It should make it so we don't panic. That's not to say you're not human. Not even the greatest of believers can say they won't be overwhelmed. Even David said, when I am overwhelmed, I will look into the rock that is higher than I. Jesus reacted. He stood up in that boat. He rebuked. And I guarantee you, think about this. The ship is rocking and the ship is sinking. His disciples are clinging to the side because it's, that's Celine calling for some reason. Yeah. I don't know why. Let me get rid of this. Yeah, we should go. Good. These men, the most dangerous thing you probably could do in a boat that is in a storm is stand up. And yet Jesus stood up. He rebuked the winds and the sea, and everything obeyed. Now they all ask, what manner, what kind of a man is this? And it's his deity. Obviously, this is no normal man. Then lastly, there are two demon-possessed men healed in verse 28. When he was come to the other side of the country of the Gergesenes, there met him two possessed with devils. In Luke, how many are there? Or in Mark, let me say this. How many does it describe? Only one. So there's often, one of the writers will focus just on one of the two. Sometimes you'll see two men blind by the wayside, but they'll be described only as one. So here there are two. Verse 28, when he was come to the other side of the country of the Gergesenes, there met him two possessed with devils coming out of the tombs, exceeding fierce, so that no man might pass by that way. They were terrorists. Behold, they cried out, saying, What have we to do with thee, Jesus? Not the Son of Man. But they cry out, Thou Son of God, art thou come hither to torment us before the time? And there was a good way off from them a herd of many swine feeding. So the devils besought him, saying, If thou cast us out, suffer us to go away into the herd of swine. And he said unto them, Go. One word. And when they were come out, there they went into the herd of swine, and behold, the whole herd of swine ran violently down a steep place into the sea and perished in the waters. And they that kept them fled. And they went their ways into the city and told everything that was befallen to the possessed of the devils. Behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus and to worship him, right? No. And when they saw him, they besought him, they begged him that he would depart out of their coasts. Which is probably true. If we ever have revival in our church, if God ever breaks and begins to transform and save people like we've never imagined or ever seen, people begin to get right with God and marriages back together, wayward sons and daughters coming home. If we ever have the experience of the presence of God like we need, everybody around us will say, go away. It will terrify. Right now, we're tolerable because we're only a little light in a dark world. But when we get bright, it will terrify the lost around us. So let me talk about these two demon-possessed men. Jesus shows the most important kind of healing, and that's the healing of the Spirit. Only one man is mentioned in Mark 5 and in Luke 8. But here, these men were possessed with devils, plural. Devils are, some people believe that they're fallen angels. Devils are not fallen angels. What happened, Darren, to the fallen angels, according to 2 Peter? The angels which fell are reserved in darkness, chains of darkness. So the majority of fallen angels, not every one of them, but the majority of them are in darkness right now. So if I have a devil, the devil, he has a multitude of little d devils. And these, if you know anything about a guy, a demon in the Bible called Beelzebub. I'm not sure how to spell it. I have to look at it.
Is this different from what it said, Legion for the Germanic?
Yes, this is the same one.
It's the same one?
Yep. Now, so the devils in this man are legion, meaning there are thousands. As a matter of fact, this swine, it says there were 2,000 swine that died. And those devils, now there's a demon in the Bible described as Beelzebub. He's called the Lord of what? The flies. Why my ink is going bad? We'll find out. The other fact about this thing is there are 2,000 inside these men. So how big are they? You're not packing 2,000 fallen angels inside of this man. You got something that is small, and that's so. We have devils which are small creations of the devil. They're little bitty devils. And so when you think of demonic work, you're not dealing with dark angels and fallen angels. You're dealing with whatever Satan needed, he created. These things were not in existence. They were not created by God. They were created by the devil. So they are the size of flies or even smaller. Number 4, possession. When we talk about demon possession, that means dominated by, under the control of, and dominion. So if I'm with Mona in her car and she's driving along and I take the wheel, I'm taking control of that car at that point. It's your car, you think you're driving, and then I grab the wheel and I turn it this way. I've now possessed it for that time and taken you off the road or whatever. And don't imagine for a second the devil doesn't try to do that with your life. And only under the permission of God, but there are plenty of people who've made shipwreck. And they've made shipwreck because the devil has been allowed. He cannot take control like what I was describing there, because the Lord will let him. But we can sort of let our hands off of the wheel, and then he takes us down a dark path. So these men were dominated by, they were under the control, they were under the dominion of devils. The characteristics of demon possession: exceeding fierce. That's why we're always very careful with anger, because anger is an indication that you are under demonic power. And it's very important for Christians to be afraid of being angry. The Bible says if you ever do get angry, make sure it is gone by the end of the day. And that's why the Bible says put it away, along with bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor. Because these guys were fierce, and that's the end product of probably these two men, when they were young, they were abused, they were hurt, and it just fed on itself, and people trying to tie them down, they only got more fierce. Anger feeds. Anger never goes away. And unless anger is unplugged, it will only grow. They were terrifying to everyone, scary. They were scared of Jesus. Here's a big word, schizophrenic. S-C-H-I-T. Z-O, schizophrenic, P-H-R-E-N-I-C. They were half terrified of Jesus, and they were half worshiping him. So when you read in Mark chapter 5, this man comes and he worships Jesus, and then he's saying, don't cast us out. So he's got multiple personalities. Mark 5 says some more things, that it was an unclean spirit, which means it was a filthy spirit, it was a wicked spirit. Number 2, he lived, as we see here, he lived in the tombs, obsessed with death, dying, probably a hypochondriac, constantly thinking everything wrong with him. Unusual strength. When they tried to bond him, tie him down, he broke the chains. They were uncontrollable. Untamable is the word that's used. Unteachable, unchangeable, crying all the time. Now let's look back at Mark 5 telling us. Totally emotional. These were men who were crying all the time. And then number 6, suicidal, constantly cutting themselves. All right, these devils knew Jesus and instantly knew who he was, the Son of God. Notice that Jesus will torment them one day at an appointed time. Let's go to Revelation chapter 14:10. That should fill in Revelation 14:10. Revelation 14 says, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. Some people would describe for me, what is that describing? It means wine? Wrath? What is the wine of the wrath of God? Yes. But if you thought about that, look at it. They shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture, without dilution, into the cup of his indignation, his fury. So God will give them a cup so bitter, so painful. Now, the wine there is the dregs, the bottom of the barrel. And he's saying, you'll be forced to drink this. And he, the same, shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Verse 11, and the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night. He's speaking to people who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. But that's describing what these devils are terrified of being put through. Are you here to torment us before the time? Number 8, Jesus forces the devils out of the men and into 2,000 pigs. Those pigs went berserk. Look at what those demons did to the pigs. That's what that man had been trying to deal with and trying to control all his life. What those pigs did when they became possessed with those devils, and they jumped off a cliff, those two men struggled with those urges, those voices, those feelings every day of their life. And isn't it wonderful how Jesus could say, get out of him? And he was free. Both of them were free. Number 10, these men were cleansed and healed, and according to Mark chapter 5, it says he was sitting at the feet of Jesus and in their right mind. And yet the nearby community didn't care about the man. They were saying Jesus was not good for business because 2,000 pigs was a lot of money.
That was their livelihood.
Yeah. And a wrong wrong livelihood it was. Did you know it was wrong for a Jew to be dealing with pigs? But these guys had, whoever they were, had a business where they said, we're not selling to the Jews, we're selling to the Gentiles. So it was okay to take and raise pigs to be eaten by the Gentiles. And they were trying to live on the very edge of the rules of being a Jew. And when Jesus came along and knocked their empire out, they got rid of Jesus so they could have their pigs. It's amazing. So, all right, that is chapter 8. Chapter 9. Jesus and the disciples have finished in Gadara. He's passed over the Sea of Galilee again, back to Nazareth. And there, he's in his own city, which is in the Capernaum area in Nazareth. So chapter 9 and verse 1 says, and he enters into a ship. He passed back over the Sea of Galilee and came into his own city. So the first thing that Jesus does is he heals a man of the palsy. So chapter 9 verse 1, and he entered into a ship and passed over and came into his own city. And behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer. Thy sins be forgiven thee. Behold, certain of the scribes said within themselves, This man blasphemeth. Now, before we read on, Mona, how could that be a blasphemy?
That they didn't believe that he could just forgive sins, and only God could forgive sins.
Excellent. He's claiming an attribute of God to forgive sins. Now, is there anybody today that claims to be able to forgive sins?
Priests.
Yes. And that is blasphemy. For some human to be able to claim to absolve somebody else's sins, that's reserved to God. So Jesus is not blaspheming because he is God. All right, so let's keep going. This man blasphemed, verse 4. And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, so they're not speaking it out loud, he says, Wherefore think ye evil in your hearts? Now, wherefore means what, Darren? Usually, wherefore does not mean therefore. Why? So, why think ye evil in your hearts? There's a question mark at the end. For whether is easier, you have to answer me, Allison. Is it easier to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise and walk? You tell me, Allison. Which is easier?
For a person, arise and walk. But for Jesus,
Well, I couldn't say to somebody, Arise and walk. It is just as impossible to heal someone, get them to rise up and walk when they're paralytic, as it is to say, your sins are forgiven you. See what Jesus is doing? He's creating a conundrum in their minds going, because what did they expect of Jesus? What did they think he would do with this man? Heal him. And he doesn't heal him. He says, your sins are forgiven. So he's turned everything on his head and they're going, wow, if he had healed him, we would have believed. But he is forgiving him. And only God can, only God can heal and only God could forgive. So he's showing his deity, again, in a marvelous way.
In those days, did they think that he was the lamb or whatever he was because he sinned? He had sin in his life?
They might have. But that's not what Jesus is actually doing. He's not forgiving him of his sins that might have caused his paralysis, his palsy. Palsy is a form of paralysis. You ever hear somebody, we were talking last week about Bell's palsy? On your face, where half of your face sort of, because maybe a partial stroke or whatever, is called palsy, which is an old word for paralysis. All right, so Jesus says, both are impossible, and I'm able to do either. So he's actually forgiving him of all sin, not just some original sin that might have caused him to be paralytic. Verse 6, but that ye may know that the Son of Man, there's that phrase again, he's not calling himself the Son of God, he says, so that you can know that this guy right here has power on earth to forgive sins. Then saith he to the sick of the palsy, Arise, take up thy bed now and go into thine house. So now he says, all right, be healed. So he's saying, for you to know that I can forgive, I will heal him. So what was the purpose of Jesus healing the blind, the lame, raising the dead? What was the purpose of it? Simple answer, but I want a much deeper one. into this context, why did he heal the man? Why did he go ahead and heal him? Come on, Darren.
To show that he was God.
And that he could forgive. So yes, he's showing God. But you see, look, if I came along and you've got a long history of rebellion and sinful life, no matter what your husband says. I don't believe a word of it. Anyway, but you've got a long history of rebellion, sinful life, you're a drunkard, and you come to me and I go, your sins are forgiven. You go, yeah, you have no idea what I've been through. That's why a Christian can say, if you believe on Jesus Christ, you can be completely forgiven. But we can do that because Jesus came along and he said, all right, you won't believe that I can forgive this man of all of his sins, just like he was able to forgive the woman caught in adultery. I can tell her, neither do I judge you, because I've forgiven you. I can say that because I can heal the impossible. So he heals to prove he can forgive. So what do we normally want of Jesus as a human race? Yeah, but to fix our problems. Jesus says, I fixed people's problems, it didn't help them. They actually turned around and they want to be dead. But I fixed their problems to prove that I can save their souls. All right, are you following me now? It is the most upside down revolutionary concept. So that's why he spent time healing the Jews. He didn't go all over the world healing everybody. That wasn't his goal. His goal was to prove, I can heal your soul. So we go on down, we finish up. And he arose and he departed back to his house. But when the multitude saw it, they marveled. They seemed to be amazed. And they glorified God, which had given such power. Who did they think Jesus was at that point still? Just a man. So they're not sure who this guy is. And they may say he's the Messiah even, but they don't believe he's the Son of God yet. So let's go quickly here. Jesus heals this man. The palsy, the account is also given in Mark chapter 2, and is much more extensive there. What do? They break up the roof, they drop him in, and it's very much more descriptive. I love Mark's. They are some of the best friends you could ever have. Okay? And they bring that paralyzed man to Jesus in his bed, and I like how it says Jesus saw their faith. He didn't look at the paralyzed man's faith. I don't know if he had any faith at all. I guess he did, because usually you need faith to save somebody. But let me ask you this. Did Lazarus believe that Jesus could raise him from the dead?
No.
Because Lazarus was dead. So I have confronted and been with charismatics who have, and I've caught them in the act, and they'll walk away saying they weren't healed because they didn't have enough faith. And I have had to rebuke them because they have crushed another Christian. Because healing does not usually need my faith. It just needs the will of God. That's why we pray, if it be in your will. That's very careful. But when a charismatic says, so-and-so didn't get healed because they didn't have enough faith, well, I always point and say, what about Lazarus? And what about this guy? When he saw their faith. Now, I will allow that probably the man in the stretcher has a lot of faith because they've lifted him up on that roof. They're dropping him. He could have fallen out at any time and broke his neck. So he's trusting his friends and he's wanting to go to Jesus. But he saw their faith. So, what is the only thing that impresses God? Our faith. Remember that for your final. Our faith.
What was the number 3 fellow?
Saw. S-A-W. Jesus saw their faith. And think about it. Jesus sees faith. He doesn't see all your accomplishments. He sees your faith. And that's very important. I wonder when God sees me praying, does he see faith or does he see words? Routine. Rote action. So, visible faith is not what we believe, but whether we fully believe it. Now, people believe in Jesus, but ask them to trust Jesus to supply their needs instead of being on the dole, and all of a sudden you're on a problem. If you tell a man, listen, why don't you get off the dole, and why don't you get a job and trust God to take it, well, I couldn't do that, then you're not trusting Jesus yet. An example of people saying they believe the Bible, they won't take time to read it, and they definitely don't obey what it says. Question, can anybody see your faith? Can they see if you are committed to trusting the Lord Jesus? That's very convicting. Are you trying to impress God with your best efforts, or trusting God in obedience to what He asks of you? Sometimes He asks you just to wait. Or are you willing to risk everything and trust God's way of doing things? Now that is faith. So, Jesus spoke one word: forgiveness. Everyone expected Jesus to speak some physical healing, and yet forgiveness was totally unexpected. The scribes got upset and they accused Jesus of blaspheming God. Jesus upsets the whole religious crowd. They had a very twisted method of getting sins forgiven. To a Jew, especially in Jesus' day, there were loads of ceremonies that had to be repeated all the time, and no one was ever able to tell you whether you were ever spiritually okay. Which is just like being in a Catholic church. You never can know, am I okay? Well, not quite yet. And you know, when you die, even then, you better make sure you get some friends still praying for you. These Pharisees and scribes had added to the Bible. They had taken away so much that you couldn't get forgiven if you wanted to. Jesus just up and forgave some unknown man on his faith alone in Jesus' name. Acts 4:12 says, there's none of the name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved, just by believing in His name. When was the last time someone shouted from the housetops here that forgiveness is free in Jesus? That's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do. Salvation is free. If salvation is free, then a whole lot of people will be out of a job in the morning, mainly priests, if people got wind of it. So blasphemy means, underline this, to demote God, to falsely blame God, to be irreverent and disrespectful of God. Just know that. I don't know if I'm going to actually that on the final, but that's what it means to blaspheme. The scribes and Jesus said that Jesus was acting like God. So they're blaspheming because God can't be a man. He doesn't have body odor. But you've got to understand the Antichrist will blaspheme God. In Revelation 13, he will verbally, pointedly blaspheme God. Number 6, Jesus uses his healing experience to teach about spiritual healing. It is impossible to heal a palsied man, right? Yet Jesus was able to heal him, right? People believed that he could heal a man. He didn't have a problem with Jesus. They didn't have a problem with Jesus healing. But it's just as impossible to forgive a man his sins. And no one believed that anyone but God could forgive sins. So Jesus challenges them to accept that he could forgive sins and thereby accept the fact that he was God in the flesh. That's what he was trying to get them to conclude. And Jesus declares that he had the power to both forgive sins and to heal, but he forgave sins by being able to heal, so he heals both men. There's no doubt that an impossible miracle occurred, and they marveled and they glorified God at the miracle. I don't think that they were impressed that he forgave. But do you? Do you think they went, he actually forgave the man? Do you think they valued that? Well, we're talking about the normal people. When it says there in chapter 9, it says, verse 8, but when the multitude saw him standing up and walking home with his bed, they were marveling at the miracle. But what were they missing? He was forgiven. And I wonder if church is boring because we really don't look for the spiritual when we're looking for the carnal or the physical. Number 9. But none of them became believers in Jesus Christ yet. None of them did. They still thought of him as a guy. So Jesus, knowing their thoughts, and he knows ours too, he presents proof that he can forgive sins.